let's kick this thing off. Welcome everybody. Thank you for stopping by and hanging out with Cryptonairz for another AMA. We're here with the Nodeify team, which I am very excited about. This is kind of one of those Node 2.0 projects that I've been talking about inside Cryptonairz in my Sensei chats the past couple weeks. Actually, a project that has use case and use for the protocol, and so I am very excited to sit here with the team and to learn about it with you guys. Learn about it a little bit more with you guys. Mr. Cricket, Quix, Sir Windex, who wants to start? I'd like to know, who you guys are and what you do for the project, and maybe a little bit about, your past experience. If you guys can do that, that'd be great.
Awesome. Yeah. I'll jump in first. And first of all, thank you for your time and to the community and giving us a platform to be able to share our story about the project and our vision and where we want to take it. So, hi everybody. My name's Quix. I am the lead engineer for Nodeify. I have a background in computer science. I've been in the past. I worked for Microsoft for about 5 years as part of the Azure platform, building out a lot of that. If anyone's familiar with Azure Cloud. And then after that, I moved over to Amazon Web Services as a senior software engineer, working on the back-end control plane aspect of how AWS works behind the scenes. And yeah, so after that, I sort of got into the crypto space and went down the DeFi rabbit hole as such. And I learned a hell of a lot in a short amount of time, as we all have in DeFi and in crypto. But came across a great group of guys here and put together Nodeify with them together, and so we're bringing our experience to centralize it in our team here. So that's a bit about me. And
fantastic. Mr. Cricket, what you got for us?
So I have a background in plant molecular physiology and photobiology, and for the last 12 years I've worked primarily with a bunch of different startups and companies doing community management and operations oversight. So for Nodeify, I'm basically doing the same thing here, just doing community management and operations oversight for Nodeify.
Cool, great. Thank you, man. And Mr. Windex.
Hi, thanks for having us. My name is Dex. I'm doing the financials on Nodeify. I have over a decade of experience working for various banks and investment firms, and now making my way into the DeFi space.
Awesome, man. Great. And then besides the three of you, how big is the rest of the team? Are we talking like another 3 or 4 people, another 10 people? What's the other makeup of the team?
We have another 2 developers on board. So we have another sort of back-end DevOps engineer who's got a lot of expertise in the cloud to help us automate the infrastructure that we need and secure the infrastructure that we need to scale our operations. And also a front-end dev that's working very hard to make things look and feel pretty, because that's very important when we're building a consumer-facing product, as we'll talk about a bit here.
Absolutely, and I know the project has a lot in depth, and we'll get into it. Why don't you, whoever wants to take this question first, but why don't, for the people maybe that haven't heard of Nodeify or what you guys are or what you guys are trying to build and to achieve, why don't you guys give us the maybe 30,000 view elevator pitch of what Nodeify is, and then we can get into some more technical questions.
Yeah, perfect. Let's do it. So Nodeify is essentially a bridge between the traditional DeFi as a service platforms that you might be familiar with. Node as a service platforms in the DeFi space, and bridging that into the developer ecosystem, right? So when we think about traditional Node as a service, there is this concept where compute capacity is created. And when I say compute capacity, essentially what that means is servers need to be provisioned to facilitate developer demands, right? So this infrastructure needs to be created, and that is created by node operators. A very simple concept. We're all familiar with the idea of how this works in node as a service offerings, right? Nodes get created, but what we're sort of doing differently and how we're sort of spinning this is that these nodes, in a lot of traditional platforms that you might have seen in the DeFi node as a service space, they don't actually have a use case, right? This idea that nodes get offered to to investors, right? And investors don't utilize nodes, right? Nodes are a developer construct, right? They're utilized by developers to build, test, and deploy a smart contract. So what we actually do is we take that compute capacity that the investors create and we offer that to developers, teams, and businesses through our software as a service offering. So that's what we call our developer portal. You hear it referred to in the chat, but it's a software as a service concept that we offer to our consumer side of the business, or our customers. So yeah, sort of bridging those two worlds, because we see a need and a demand from businesses, consumers, businesses that want to deploy on the blockchain across many different blockchains. They want to have that set of easy to use services that are abstracted and offered in a simple single interface where they can interact with it, deploy their app, test their app, see the metrics, and so on. And we're just coupling that with the fact that investors and node operators will supply that capacity and supply that infrastructure for those developers, if for some returns on that revenue generated through the software as a service interface. So just bridging the two worlds. That's sort of the elevator pitch, if you will.
No, that's great, and I know. So I've been trying to read through your white paper because it is very interesting. You guys talk about you guys are going to provide web services to streamline the deployment of decentralized applications across various blockchain networks. Will you talk to us a little bit about maybe what other services you guys are going to offer besides just the ability for developers to come in, use those endpoints to test their smart contracts to make sure everything's running smoothly? What other services are you guys going to be offering to these partners, these people that are going to be bringing on to use the product?
Right. Yeah, so I mean, this day and age, you can't sell an RPC endpoint, right? I mean, this is sort of a bit of a fallacy that I think we've built up in the DeFi node space a little bit. It's like there's no value intrinsically in just offering an RPC endpoint. Those are free, right? You can go to Infura, you can go to Morales, you can utilize a free endpoint as you will, right? So what it really comes down to is a packaged set of offerings that are built around this infrastructure. So just offering the endpoint is one thing, but there's far more to it than that, right? When we start to think of how businesses and enterprises consume and deploy applications, they need far more than that. They need insights into their application. They need monitoring and metrics of the performance of the infrastructure. They need a service level agreement, so they need to know that their node is not going to go down, right? They need to have potentially load balanced set of nodes so that they can have high availability and high throughput and the lowest possible latency, which is really important as we all know when you're trying to do things at a rapid speed. They also might need these endpoints geographically located in certain areas around the world, right? So they might need it close to their customer base or close to their development team. And at the end of the day, they might need to just call up, be able to sort of have a support agreement where they can say, hey, Nodeify, we have this idea, or we want to change this, or we want to do this. That's where our product and our set of offerings can come into place to empower them to ensure that they can build their application just how they want to build it, and they can have all of the bits and pieces that are sort of needed along the way. And this is quite a common business model you'll see in a lot of other software as a service offerings. In the node space, there's Infura and Morales. These are the two sort of large,
bigger ones,
and quick nodes as well. But there's exactly. They're sort of like the sort of the large players in this space. And so they have these sort of priced tiering plans in place, and they sort of go from the developer tier, which is just a free tier where the developer can come in, build their application, get a bit of a feel for the environment, through to the teams plans, and then all the way up to enterprise, where you have various levels of features and throughputs and latencies and all sorts of things in place. But yeah, that just the node offering itself is just one small part of it, right? The endpoint and the consumption of that. But if we start to think about what certain cloud platforms might look like, how they create certain set of abstracted services, everything from indexed text searching, databases, APIs, these sort of things that developers consume when they're creating applications. We're going to be abstracting certain elements of these and being able to offer them to developers, teams, and businesses as they consume our platform.
So I'm glad you brought up. I know. So when I was speaking to some people that kind of understand what you guys are doing, they brought up Morales and some of these other companies. How are you guys going to kind of get into that market, right? Because you already have some bigger companies doing this. Is it going to be, you guys are going, your prices are going to be better, your software is going to be better? I mean, how do you guys plan on breaking into this already kind of, I don't want to call it congested because maybe that's the wrong word, but there are other services and products doing this. So how are you guys going to stand out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good question. I think it comes back to we do want a healthy competitive landscape. That is really good for any product, right? Yeah. You need that competition to really thrive and to sort of force innovation. to drive innovation, I should say. But the reality of it is that it is a pretty there's quite a few players in this space. There's 3 or 4 others that are sort of doing this. But that being said, the other side of the coin is that there is an absolute massive amount of developers, and there's a very small amount of developers currently in the Web3 space, right? So we are seeing from some of the public figures or statistics that are coming out, the growth of the Web3 development space and how this is sort of evolving over the last year specifically. And it's absolutely booming. You can just look at the installs on certain packages that are happening every day. You can see the developer rates for onboarding into Avalanche, for example, which is exploding. Near Protocol as well, which we'll talk about later as well. There's a lot of these platforms that we've been keeping an eye on and watching grow over the last 6 to 8 months, and they're just absolutely booming. So we are strategically targeting these chains, right? This is part of our approach to this marketing aspect. Is we are looking at where we see massive amounts of developer onboarding, and we're initially deploying our services across these chains. So we're starting with Phantom, AVAX, Near Protocol, and Polygon. And these are the 4 that we believe have the highest, impact for us to deploy our product on and service as developers. And as we sort of pave out a future, we're going to be obviously keeping an eye on the statistics and metrics for other chains and sort of expanding there where possible. But being able to expand at those chains is part of, as you say, right, being able to offer a service that others aren't. Some of the other players are not offering or not fast to move into these areas. For example, Infura still only operates within the ecosystem of Ethereum and Polygon, which is just Ethereum. But so we're able to do that, and also we do believe that there's a massive amount of developers still in the Web 2 space that are not transitioned over to the Web 3 space. So a large majority of our marketing and focus is going to be about lowering the bar for Web 3 development coming into the ecosystem and being able to make a transition period for those developers through tools and services and familiar concepts that, as someone who's been a developer in the Web 2 space for over 13 years, I know exactly what I went through, getting into the Web3 space, trying to find common ground and being able to step into things that made sense for me. And if I can go back and understand their story and empathize and create those services for them, I think we can capture a large market share doing that, especially if we can make those relatable and easy to use and simplified.
Yeah. No.
So there's quite a few different steps there. Yeah.
No, that well spoken, man, and I completely agree. I think there's a lot of Web 2 developers that are going to wake up very soon and realize that there's this whole beautiful ecosystem of Web 3 apps and all this stuff being built out. And I think, anybody that's listening to this, if they're not listening to this 4 years later, if you're listening to this right now, you're still incredibly early to Web 3 and everything crypto is going to offer. So, no, I think you guys are doing an amazing job. I did pull up the white paper here. And so you guys are planning to launch in some geographical regions, right? Ireland, Singapore, North Virginia, right? Is that correct? Where you guys wanted to kind of start, where you guys are going to be having these stacks or these node systems? Can you walk us through why you guys chose those locations, and are you guys going to be adding locations onto that?
Right. Yeah. So essentially, what we need to do is we need to be able to offer sort of geographical locations that are going to be relatively located, close to our consumers or our customers, right? So we are going to be offering, 3 different regions. So it's going to be we're going to first deploy in Ireland on launch day, and then we're going to be expanding Singapore and North Virginia, as mentioned, Northern Virginia, I should say. And then be expanding. So we do plan to expand to around 15 to 16 global regions. And that's, the ability for us to sort of pick up our stack and to deploy it into a new region, that happens within under 3 to 4 minutes, right? So it's a very, very quick process for us. And our team has a lot of experience in working in AWS, which is where our backend is hosted. So we're able to sort of take the compute elements and those resources that we need, which are of course created by our node providers, right? Our node operators, our investors, and we're able to then deploy that capacity to any sort of global geographical region that we need. So, for example, if we have a business that's saying, hey, we want to be able to access Nodeify's abstracted set of services in San Francisco, we can do that. We can also sort of tailor it to where they are at any point in time. It's quite flexible in that sense. So
And,
So yeah.
and before we get into kind of the investor portion of it, I mean, we've been talking a lot about the developer part of it, and I think it's very important to understand like that this is kind of where you guys are aiming this to is towards developers. How easy it is for it, like let's say I have a smart contract that I want to test, I need an RPC endpoint. Walk us through how long that takes. I come to you guys saying, hey guys, I need this and this. How long before I can start testing my smart contract on an endpoint?
It should be no more than 2 clicks. Like a lot of the marketing and the research that we've done, we've interacted with all of the competitor services that we'll be sort of seeing as direct competitors, and it should be no more than simply going on and pressing two clicks to sort of get access to an endpoint, and that should give you a developer plan that you can sort of utilize to get up and going, right? Which should be free, of course. There's no reason to pay for that. You're not consuming any sort of set of services from the business. You're not requiring support. You're not, there's no need to charge for that. It does create this level of stickiness on the platform that enables the progression through the platform naturally into different paid tiers after that if they choose to stick around. But there's no need up front. But yeah, I mean that process really needs to be extremely easy for sure. That's very important for us, definitely.
So because I didn't think about this before, but I'm a developer. I come to you guys. I set up my RPC endpoint. I can test. How long is someone going to be using these services, and then after they're done using the services, do they they end their RPC endpoint, and then you guys go you can loan that one to somebody else? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how well this, just a little bit more background on this. I really want to understand this.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, there is this, we've started calling them internally sort of the NCUs, like the Nodeify capacity units, right? Because it sort of can work like you say, right? Like there's going to be this idea of, the left-hand side of the picture, as I always say, which is the investor or the node operator, right, on the left, and we're a platform in the middle of this picture. And on the right-hand side, you have the developer or the consumer that we've been talking about. Now, that consumer on the right-hand side, they can consume a dynamic or a variable amount of capacity at any point in time, right? They could be utilizing one RPC endpoint, or they could be utilizing many, or they could be utilizing a service that has many, different endpoints or different node capacity units behind it. So, it's sort of a one-to-many or a many-to-many in most cases. But, we're going to be building not just this RPC endpoint concept, right? There's going to be services, and I'll give you an example. We'll be looking into building, many different set of abstractor services that make development easier and lower the bar of entry, right? So if I'm a developer and I'm coming to the Web3 platform, Web3 space, I might be looking for what they call an event bus, right? Something that's like event triggered, like something that might fire something on one chain, and if something happens on one chain, execute a transaction on another chain, right? And maybe we handle the gas and we handle the payments and certain bits around that. But basically, like this simple concept of just cross chain execution. To actually facilitate that, you would need 2 nodes. You would need one listening and subscribed, 2 events on chain A, and one that's ready to fire an event or a transaction on chain B to, in response to the chain A event. So like there's this service then that, and that's just a 2-chain example, quite simple, but you can imagine now as you start to add more chains and add more things that need to be listened to or fired, you start to require more capacity or more ears listening out for events in those chains, right? So there's a whole set of services that we'll be building, and they'll be just simply sort of utilized from a simple interface from a developer perspective. But behind the scenes, there'll be quite a lot of these capacity units that are supplied by our investors to facilitate that infrastructure.
Wow, this thing's pretty incredible. Before I ask all the questions, and don't give my good friend Scott here, who's my co-pilot, some time to ask his questions. Scott, why don't you jump in and add value? I know you got some good questions for these guys, and then I can follow up when you're done, sir.
Sure, yeah. So, a couple basic things real quick. So, when are you guys launching? What day?
We're launching out. So our pre-sale is on the 8th. So coming up on the 8th of April, and so that'll be for our pre-sale folks who are part of that. And that's still open, by the way. We have pre-sale closing on the 7th will be the final day. We're sort of handing out pre-sale, so we've got quite a lot of time left.
Awesome.
And then we launch 2 days later on the 11th, or sort of almost 3 days later. Yeah, at that point. But yeah. Yeah.
And for those that don't know, what blockchain are you launching on first? Phantom?
Yes, good question. So our smart contract will be on Phantom, indeed. So all transactions and gas and everything, that's all on Phantom. That's basically where everything is located, and then the actual back end operations of the thing, of the platform itself spans multiple chains. Yeah.
Awesome. And so people would just need to have Phantom. They don't need any other special coin or like a stable or anything like that. It's just Phantom. They can purchase the tokens or nodes, whichever they're doing.
Yeah, so the pre-sale will be in Phantom. So anyone who's part of the pre-sale, that's all done in Phantom, and we have our token, which our token is NDFI. So the trading pair will be on Spooky Swap. It'll be NDFI to Phantom.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So in the onboard form, when you guys filled all of that stuff out, you said that there's going to be mechanisms in place for like bots and whales and stuff like that. Like, what do you guys have in store without giving away too much information about what is in place to prevent like mass dumping and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, we'll just go back to bots because you mentioned bots, but
Sure.
So I mean, it's important for us to have a fair launch, right? And we don't want to, we don't want anyone to get sort of screwed over by the sort of the way that these decentralized exchanges work. And so, for us, the main thing was not being able to have the mempool sort of sniped, right? So that just for anyone who's unfamiliar with how this bot sniping process works, not to sidetrack too much from the project, but it's sort of like a doctor, what's it called, like a medical surgery, like a doctor surgery, when you go in and you're all in the waiting room and the doctor comes out and says, oh, it's John Smith's turn. And then now everyone knows it's John Smith's turn to go in. And so, everyone then can sort of like, they all know that information at the same time, including John Smith, right? Because they all found out. So, that's what we call the mempool, right? In the blockchain, right? There's basically this waiting room where transactions go before they actually get committed or added to a block rather. And that's the mempool. So what happens is these snipers, or these they're actually just smart contracts that are basically watching the mempool. As soon as liquidity gets added to a pool, they'll execute a swap in the same block liquidity gets added, right? So there's no way that anyone ever gets a chance to actually perform a swap because the bot basically got in at the same block liquidity was added, and humans are not that fast, unfortunately. Yeah. So we have some measures in place to ensure that anyone who's buying liquidity or anyone who's swapping in our pool, in the snipers really only care about the first 3 blocks, maybe 1 or 2 blocks really, but where basically we'll be blocking any addresses that do attempt to swap within the first 5 blocks. So I mean, and if you're buying in the first 5 blocks, you're not human anyway, so that's fine, and they can be unblocked if they are somehow doing that. But yeah, that's sort of how we're getting around that process.
Yeah, I think that's going to help out a lot of people, because I think the node market is so oversaturated right now. People are looking for something to get into next that's actually going to be around in a couple months or even 6 months or whatever. And I think what you guys are attempting to do, I think you'll definitely be around. So getting on to like the developer side of things. So what you guys are trying to achieve, what does this do to benefit the developers wanting to come to you?
Well, I mean, really for us, we need to lower the bar of entry, as I said before, like for developers to come into this space, right? That's the main thing, right? Be able to create a great experience for them to build their app. And of course we're in a position where we can sort of innovate quite a bit as well. Like we are, we talked about Morales and Infura before, but in reality is like we are building this platform, and we are going to be the only one of doing something like this with an ERC20 token or with a token, right? These other platforms, they're not. Yep. You have to swipe a credit card if you want to access anything. That's how it works, right? They're basically fiat businesses, and we are building a proper business, right? This is actually a business, external facing business. So we will, of course, allow credit cards as well. We want to, again, keep the bar low, but of course, we will be able to have payments in our own native token for the consumer side of the business, and also in FTM as well. So it's a bit of a hybrid in that sense, but
sure.
I like it.
Yeah,
where will your business be registered? Once you get that everything squared away with that, like where is it going to be in another country like Australia? Is it going to be
UK?
here in the United States?
Yeah, we have a couple of options based on the team's geography right now. So we're sort of still working out exactly the absolute best place to do that. But the process itself, we were sort of looking into getting that off the ground, starting the process sort of after we launch the platform.
Okay,
So
cool.
yeah.
Awesome. And that will be, I mean, obviously that's just going to be something that you guys decide, right? Like that's not going to be a community voted type thing.
Come on, Scott, ask better questions.
No, we are definitely making a public business because we do need to in order to have that transparency for the developer ecosystem.
Okay.
There's no way that as a Web2 developer myself, sort of coming into this space, there's no way we would be able to build up the level of trust needed if you were a sort of anonymous crypto
Sure.
group. It has to be completely transparent. We have to go to conferences and talk about our product. We need to do proper advertising, marketing, education, and everything. So it's very, very important.
Sure. So what, I guess since you guys are kind of trailblazing, what are going to be like the developer fees that people are going to see to come and use your service? Like is in those fees, are they going to, they're going to obviously benefit the protocol. Like how are you guys going to make this sustainable? It's not going to be like 500,000 nodes are created and it's just, is there going to be a cap on that as well?
I mean, this is a thing, and this is what we're seeing a lot of, in the market these days. There's simply a lack of foresight and forecasting, right? So, we have Dex here as well, who's a master in the numbers, and he'll jump in after this. But it's really about we've done a lot of work around modeling and forecasting, and I see there's quite a lot of people from our Discord here as well, and they'll sort of always hear us harp on about modeling and forecasting, right? Because all of the outcomes are deterministic, right? You can just sort of simulate how much emissions your platform's going to have based on how many nodes you have, right? So if it's one node, you know exactly how much you're going to have. If it's 100 nodes, it's simply just a formula.
Sure.
And this is sort of what we see a lack of, in this space. We haven't really seen people coming out saying this is exactly what we're going to have, or they maybe just choose not to disclose that. But we've released 2 blog posts on this, outlining it in detail, showing our exact emissions over n amount of days, and that we've built those formulas from the Excel world side of things, which is where Dex lives, for all of these forecasting, into our actual unit tests. So when we run our unit tests against our contract, we can see the exact emissions of the platform, whether it be 1 node, 10 nodes, 1 million nodes. So we know where we're at. Obviously, 1 million nodes is not sustainable at all. But going back to your question around caps, everything in the platform is an adjustable lever, as we call, right? So we have, and that's on a per node type, right? So Phantom node is like completely different to AVAX node, which is different to Near node. All of the node types, including ones that we're going to release, come with these adjustable levers for costs, tapering, rewards, base rewards, fees. Like everything is completely adjustable, and those adjustable levers have to align with the revenue that the business creates through its multiple revenue streams, right? There's more than one revenue stream. We've just spoken about one so far, but there are many others as well. So it's this constant adjusting of the levers that needs to be done. And this is something we talk about a lot from day one, because we don't want to sit there and say, this percentage of returns is sustainable forever. Like when we started seeing that in the DeFi, in the node space, we just knew that we were at the absolute top when people are starting to say things are for life, because it's just rubbish, right?
Yeah,
it's just not how business works.
No.
Yeah, it's not. It's not sustainable. It's not feasible. It's not even realistic. So
right, it's just dishonest and just pulling the rug over your investors. It's just yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And also I think people tend to get too greedy, and I think you can obviously see that in the DeFi space today. They don't do any research on any of these projects whatsoever. They see something called a node and lifetime rewards, and they're super high. And I mean, those scammers, they get people coming in. So, I mean, they're winning on their side, but people need to take a little responsibility there.
Right. Yeah.
So can you talk to us about the grant and incentive program that you mentioned in one of your documents?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, all of the chains, a lot of layer 1 and layer 2 ecosystems have developer grants and incentive programs. They also have educational grants and incentive programs as well. So they're sort of 2 different things, but we'll just dive into them at a high level. But if you think about what like a blockchain lives and dies by the developers and the dApps that come onto it, right? If no one builds dApps, on a blockchain, like decentralized apps is dApps, by the way, if anyone wasn't familiar. If no one builds, I'll just call them apps. If no one builds apps on a blockchain, that blockchain's dead, right? The only way blockchains live is through the fees generated from apps, right? So like that is the key KPI, right? The key performance indicator for a blockchain, right? How much onboarding, how much developer and applications they have deployed along with transactions. So what these chains do is they offer incentive programs for platforms like ours and for many other platforms like educational platforms and so on, to basically be able to help and assist with onboarding developers or onboarding customers, if you will, into their ecosystem. So for us, like we are launching a software as a service platform to be able to bring developers into this space. So what we can do is start to interact with these layer one ecosystems. Layer one just means like top level blockchain, if you will, simplified, but yeah. So we can go to Near, for example, and say, hey, Near, we believe we can bring in Y% of developers over X months. Based on us creating this educational content and us offering this set of abstracted services for this price range. And we would talk with them and we would work out some sort of deal. We would be incentivized for the process. They would obviously be incentivized for the process by us bringing those developers into their ecosystem. And that's how that sort of thing works. It also flows into education as well. Like, because we are building this platform, part of our platform will be focused on educating those developers, educating also investors in our platform as well about, maybe potentially becoming developers or understanding that pathway to becoming a developer. Also just teaching people about Near or teaching people about Polygon or teaching, you know what I mean? So there's also that educational incentive programs we can also apply for and be incentivized with as well.
That's awesome. I really like that you guys have something like that you've thought of and to kind of collaborate with other projects and things like that.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, even if you see, today, I think AVEX did another $100 million incentive program for creative arts. I think it was 2 days ago, actually. But, they originally started with Avalanche Rush of 200 million, and that's been very successful. Phantom have the same thing as well. So, yeah, it's very beneficial.
Hey, Scott, real quickly, can we, I know we've been here about 32 minutes. I really want to get to, because a lot of people in the audience are probably like, how do I, how being the investor, right, not the developer side of it, can we talk a little bit about how, how investors are going to participate? Like, what do I need to do to help support the project? I'm assuming I'm building a node, right? I'm taking NDFI tokens, whether that's, is it 10 tokens? Can you walk us through how people like myself are going to participate to help support this whole ecosystem going up?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'd love to. So really, I mean, we spoke a lot about the developer space and that developer space needs capacity, right? We in order for us to run any of that stuff, we need investors to create the capacity to facilitate it. So investors will create nodes and that capacity then goes directly to the other side of the business, as we spoke about. And those nodes could be across the 4 chains that we spoke about initially. And that would be 10 tokens for each node. And that's the initial amount where I decided for those 4 nodes. But in the future, we have, again, like going back to the adjustable levers, it's all a variable based on revenue and projections and so on. And a node initially will earn 0.125 NDFI per day.
Great.
But we do have a tapering model in place that we've thoroughly explained in our blog post about the mathematics, about how it works behind the scenes. If you're interested in that, it's called Time Traveling. It's on our blog.
I have it. Basically, I read through it. It's pretty it's pretty complicated. It's good. I'm going to post it after this chat for everybody to read if they need to. So
yeah, we just want to make sure like we didn't really like the level of transparency we saw with other platforms not explaining their tapering model. So we really wanted to go out of the way and say like this is exactly what we're doing. So we're starting off around 0.125 and we taper down to around 0.05 over 185 days. So, we have a very realistic tapering model in place because of course, this is all based on our forecasting and modeling, and this elliptical curve or this exponential curve is based on what we sort of have seen through our inputs and outputs through modeling and forecasting. So, we do that, so it's around 0.05 after about 185. That's for our initial 4 sets of 4 offerings, and as we introduce new ones, we'll adjust that tapering model as needed based on our projected revenues at that point in time.
But so after 185,
what happens?
Yeah, what happens after 185 days? Is it 0.05, whatever that number you said? Is that for life, or I mean,
No.
Okay.
Right. So it will slowly still decay, but the decay, sorry, taper, I guess it's the right word.
Taper.
It will slowly taper,
Taper,
but the
decay.
tapering yes,
Same thing.
The values of the tapering at that point are incredibly low. So it's
Great.
it's a far more drawn out process to go from that of value, down from there. So it's quite a long time.
Go for it, Scott. I know you have a
Gotcha.
question.
Okay. So, the one last question I had before Rob finishes off the last few and we open it up to the community. Can you talk about the metal chips and what it does for the investors? I saw there's
Sure.
gold, silver, and bronze.
Yeah, so I mean, really, I mean, we could have sort of put anything here, but we thought nodes, computers, chips. I mean,
Yeah.
really, everything comes back to this thought of how do we better service our customers through our software as a service, right? Because that is our core business, right? So we need to be able to make sure that the services and the consumers of our business have the required capacity on those chains, right? Because we're going to be having, we plan to deploy over 10 chains by Q3. So we need to have lots of different capacity spread out all over these different chains, lots of servers, right, behind the scenes. So the chips act as a way to essentially guide our investors or guide our node operators to ensure that they spread their investments over these amount of chains, right? Because we don't want, we don't want to end up with 1 million phantom nodes and one near node. So because then someone, a service on the consumer side of the business might attempt to interact with near or might try and consume near capacity, but we don't have any because everyone decided to create phantom nodes. So we needed a way to basically help guide and direct the investor to spread their investment over those chains. And we do that by incentivizing them to basically spread their investment. So if you have one node of each chain, you would earn the bronze chip, and the bronze chip gives you a static reward unaffected by tapering. It's a very small, realistic reward, and that's 0.02 NDFI per day. The silver is 5 nodes of each network, and that's 0.04, and the gold is 0.06, which is 10 of each network, and they do stack. So they stack, and again, it's a very small increase. If at the end of it is 0.112 in total.
And how would someone go about getting one of those?
Yeah, so that's through just simply creating nodes across our various network offerings. So if you deploy one node on Phantom, one on AVAX, one on Near, and one on Polygon, then you will earn the bronze chip, and it would be 5 of each node to get silver and 10 of each node to get gold.
Is it maxed out at 100 nodes per wallet like most of these other ones, or is it? I mean, what is the cap on per wallet for creating these nodes?
Yeah, so we do have individual node caps in place, but we're not going to it's built into the smart contract, and it's not something that we'll be sort of needing to have in place at the moment. Of course, we haven't launched yet, but as we launch, but we do have also an adjustable limit on a wallet as well, which just is starting off at 100.
Okay.
But these are all, again, adjustable values that can be changed in this smart contract. We don't want to have to do we didn't think of this thing V2 contract and change everything on everyone. So yeah. That's the idea. And
yeah, sorry, go for it, Quix.
I was just going to say one more thing on the chips is the idea, just to add on to a little bit more of it, is that we're going to be adding in 10 networks by Q3. That's our goal. We already have data points to show us that developers are really interested in certain chains. We're seeing a lot of action around L2, especially as the Ethereum merge is coming in place.
Yeah.
L2 is going to get even better. So we're going to be expanding our backend infrastructure to support those chains. And what that means is that as we add more networks, the requirements for the chips get a little bit harder, right? So because you need one of each node on each network, yeah, exactly. It becomes harder with 5, and then harder with 6, and harder with 7. So it's a little bit of an incentive to spread those out, and also it's going to benefit our early investors a little bit more in the end of the trade.
No, I love that, Quix. Can you walk us through what other of these networks that you guys are thinking of? I mean, it doesn't have to be set in stone, but what other of these L2 or whatever other networks are you guys talking about or wanting to go on? What is your focus?
Yeah, I mean, really, we can't do anything unless the data shows us that it's the correct thing to do, right? Everything for us is data driven. I mean, again, it comes back to the team have such an experience of wealth from a business perspective, so we know not to make a decision unless the data actually shows us it's the right decision. So as much as I'd like to sit here and say,
love that answer, man.
This is my favorite chain. We're going to deploy on this one. I was like, that's just bullshit. So
I love that answer.
It's all about looking. So we are already actively monitoring where we think a lot of sort of centralized developer buzz is from general blockchain sentiment, and where especially with what's happening with Ethereum. But we're just keeping an eye out and looking at the data right now and just seeing what happens over the next few months.
No, man, I love that answer. That's a perfect answer. That was a great answer. Before we open it up to the community, is there any partnerships that you guys have lined up, or things that you guys are working on? So, I mean, you guys are going to launch. I guess this is a two-part question. Let's answer the partnership question before I get into the other one. Do you guys have any partnerships that you guys are working on, or you guys can talk to us about, or is that kind of hush hush?
It's really interesting because as we are, doing this sort of first thing where you tie together node as a service and software as a service, it does create this, like, we have this really competitive landscape on the software as a service side. So there's certain elements which are hyper competitive that we can't sort of like talk too much about. Of course, our service offerings and so on. But as we said, really the partnerships, a lot of the partnerships and incentives will be tied with the incentive programs we spoke about before. So as soon as we launch, we'll be engaging in the conversations we need to have with those platforms to be able to look into what's feasible and what sort of how that relationship could be built. But as for anything beyond that right now, I can't go too much into the details because there'll be.
It's all good, my friend. I always try to get something out of you. Sometimes projects slip and give me some alpha, but I know there's a lot of questions by some people, and I just want to bring them up. I think this has been a great 41 minutes, and I love what you guys have built here, and I really do think it's going to be awesome. So let's get some community members up here and get some questions asked and answered. And we got Tigers first. What's up, Tigers? What's your question for the team here?
How's it going? Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you fine, my friend.
Cool. First of all, thank you so much that's the most clear explanation of sniper bots I've ever heard. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it was.
No worries.
But I kind of have two questions. One is, well, first of all, do you have any kind of like outside normal traditional VC funding? And then, if not, or just in general, why did you choose to go the node project investment route rather than like traditional VC with like a SaaS company like this? And then the second question is kind of related to that, balancing these nodes across different chains. Why is it that like the investor has to kind of pick individually those chains rather than the investor just giving you guys a chunk of money? You have it in a big money pool and you guys making those decisions in terms of like which nodes to buy. I'd love an explanation on that, but that's all I had.
Sure. Thanks for the question. I appreciate it. So, first of all, we don't have any external VC funding for the project. We're doing this through this environment, and there's a few reasons for that. I think Dex also wanted to say something on this topic as well. Dex, do you want to handle the first question, and I'll handle the second one? Or?
Sure. I think what we kind of realized, like looking at the DeFi space and Web3 space, we felt like, okay, so this space is currently kind of, I'm not going to say misused, but I'm going to say like underused. So I feel that there's obviously a lot of people that are looking for investments in the Web3 and DeFi space. We want to see a future where the DeFi space and Web3 space grows into something or matures into something that is actually realistic and has a future in this world. So we felt like showing a kind of proper way for investors to actually invest in a company within DeFi, within Web3, especially with regulation around the corner from like many countries around the world are looking into regulating the space. We feel like we have to show how to kind of do this on a professional level, on a way that it makes sense to businesses, but also makes sense to investors, and kind of find the path forward within the space. And obviously, like it might have been like a big step for like a big responsibility for us to kind of take, but it just feels right because obviously we've all kind of been burned in this space, and seeing how these projects kind of manipulate the narrative to not really be a business viable, but just like some kind of funding for nothing platform,
right?
Which that's kind of the way we've been looking at this and feel we can show the people that this is kind of how it should look like. what an investment should mean to investors, that the investor is actually valued within the space and not just waved off under the kind of sign of this is DeFi, deal with it kind of thing. So that's kind of where we're coming from this perspective.
And actually the second answer ties directly into the first one as well. Like the reason why we don't want to just take money and put it in a pool and not tell anything and here's your return is because there's so much to learn in this space, and we would rob people of the ability to learn and understand what the blockchain is, what a layer 1 is, what a layer 2 is. Like a big part of what we're doing is about educating, right? We talked about having this educational content and this path for people to take. We're going to be doing certifications and that sort of thing through our software as a service offering. If we just sort of said like, here's this black box, put money in and you get money out, they wouldn't be able to understand like, oh, I can launch a node on Near. What is Near? Oh, why is Near different than any EVM based chain? Like, what's the difference here? How does this work? Right. So it's about opening up those avenues where investors might also want to understand more about the tech. They might want to become developers. They might want to learn more about that ecosystem. So the platform is really about tying the two together and sort of really, if we can teach people what a node is and how it actually operates, everyone's going to make way better, investment decisions, especially in this space.
Absolutely.
Cool. I actually, that brought two little mini follow-ups. One, just to be clear, on the reward side, it is a big pool that then gets dispersed evenly, right? It's not like, oh, if I, make a Near node that, it's going to be different rewards than the other.
So,
and then...
I'll answer that one quickly because that one's very interesting, which we haven't had a chance to talk about. But we have this feature called Nodeify Connect, which basically is the action of the investor or the node operator registering that node into this pool that you're talking about. So it's optional, right? The investor doesn't have to register the node into the pool, right? Because we also want to keep this traditional context where an investor might also be a developer and they just want their access to their own node, and that's all fine and dandy, right? But Connect basically registers it into this pool. Now, the way the pool works is essentially like a game of tug of war. So on the right-hand side, you have the developers pulling the rope as hard as they can and demanding capacity. On the left-hand side, the investor, they're metaphorically pulling the rope by adding capacity, right? So you have this they have this harmony where they're basically pulling back and forth. And the Connect bonus is based on the supply and demand of that relationship. So as consumers create demand through our software as a service offering, and they say, hey, we really want we want this network, or we want to deploy workloads here, or we have N amount of smart contracts deployed over this network over Y amount of time. That will cause the Connect bonus to fluctuate in real time and incentivize investors to follow the path of the higher rewards to create more capacity on the left-hand side of that game of tug of war. So it is the Connect bonus itself is the living ecosystem that is supply demand based, but the base rewards follow the exponential curve of tapering.
Awesome, cool. That's super, super interesting. And then my final follow-up is, what happens if you guys actually get bought, though? So, with these, now think about these node projects as like SaaS companies, basically. If you get bought by like a Microsoft, for instance, have you guys thought about like what happens to, to node investors? And that's all I had. So you can.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, our platform, you can think of our platform similarly to like Airbnb or Uber, right? I mean, there's an element to those platforms that's actually very similar, right? I mean, Uber own 0 vehicles, Airbnb own 0 real estate, right? They basically just are a platform that connects the two bridges, right? The bridge on the left-hand side, again, being the node operator or the investor, with the bridge to the right-hand side being the consumer, or the guest, or the rider, of the car in that Uber case, right? So there's basically this bridge between to sort of harmonize the two worlds and connect them and apply a set of rules where they need to be. But it's a successful business model that's sort of proven that we're sort of similarly applying here. But around getting bought out and all that sort of stuff, I mean, that's not something we're even remotely considering or thinking about at this point in time. We have to build our product and actually create that ecosystem first. But the reality is public businesses get bought out and traded and such every day, and the shares from public businesses still sort of carry on through ownership and so on. So that's sort of what I have to say about that.
Tigers, I really appreciate you adding value to the AMA. Thank you so much. Jive, looks like you're next, and I know you probably have a solid question or two, so go for it, my friend.
Hey, thanks, Sensei. Hey, thanks, team. Good evening. So,
Hi, Jive.
Evening.
Hey, So, I like the way you guys are a data-driven team, So my first question, what's the target addressable market you're looking at?
The targeted market we're looking at.
Target addressable market.
Sorry, could you repeat what you said? Sorry, I was talking over you.
Sure. So what is the target addressable market you're looking at?
Sure. Okay, sorry. The target addressable market. Yeah, so really where our main focus is going to be initially is on the Web 2 space, right? Like the addressable market for us is really the bridge from Web 2 to Web 3, right? We know there's a far more web or just developers in general in the Web 2 space that are maybe looking or maybe don't even know what Web 3 is capable of. That's the biggest thing, right? For me personally, and I know for a lot of my old colleagues, we were more like, oh, I mean, blockchain, that's just crypto, and like that's just money, and like we don't know. Like that's what we were thinking a few years back, right? So our addressable market is going to be on a lot of these areas where in the Web 2 space where there's this sort of negative look on Web 3 development and this idea that Web 3 development is only about crypto. Like a lot of our work is going to be about breaking this mold of like Web 3 development is not just about cryptocurrency. There's so much more to it, like about decentralized voting, about supply chain, that it goes on and on about these different platforms that can be built. So our addressable market comes back to these groups of developers that need to understand and be able to create like what's possible to create on here in the Web3 space, and a lot of that comes back to creating prototypes and showing that value, because developers don't want to do anything unless they're shown, oh yeah, it can work like this, or this is an exact way to create a prototype, or here's some tangible business value that comes back to you if your customer or you and your company were to create something in this space. So I'd say a large percentage, around 60 to 70% of our addressable market will be in the Web 2 space. And then, the remaining parts are a small amount of it's going to be based on universities and students who are coming up through that space. And then the rest of it will be based in the Web 3 existing ecosystem. So between those three is our key addressable market areas.
Okay, so from what I understand, you have a utility with developers who can build products on top of your platform. So does that mean that you're going to build SDKs, libraries, the runtime apps, and where the API call will happen, and you guys are just building a model which is equivalent to Amazon Web Services or Azure?
Yes, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't drawing inspiration from my previous employers. Not in a way where anything is taken, through sort of copyrighted ways or anything, but it's more from. We look at a lot of other projects and where they're having success. So we're big fans of Pocket Network. If you're familiar with Pocket Network, I'm sure some people are. And the way that they've sort of built their ecosystem, and definitely creating an SDK to abstract some of the complexities around Web3 development is just a key feature of what needs to be done for a lot of these bits and pieces. So we will definitely have be putting together a set of libraries and an SDK to handle interacting with some of our services, and we'll probably even do a CLI as well. So yeah, I mean, that's just going to be part of our roadmap as we evolve our set of services. And if we need that level of automation, we'll sort of dive into the different components that developers will need to utilize it.
See, from my read, I'm able to get a feeler over here that you guys are not a fully low-code, no-code model, nor you're a fully developer model, right? See, today, if you look at it, there are enterprise protocols like Hedera, Hashgraph, IBM are already creating and tying up with partners like Coursera and many other varsities to create courses to bring in the Web2 developers onboarded onto their platform. So how are you going to fight with these guys? How are you going to address your market to at least get a share out of it and be sustainable as a model? I'm not even going to the node base because 90% of the audience over here, they know nodes at one point in time will start tapering unless you are at the first 9.33% of the participants. If you don't get your ROI, it'll keep on chasing. So everyone knows over here about that. Yeah. But my question to you is in terms of the product and in terms of its sustainability. See, if you're making a product which is a low code, no code, someone like me who is not a developer or a technical or, a developer, it's easy for me to just drag and drop these APIs, SDKs, and, the forms, libraries, and create a product. Or if you're not again completely towards a developer model because you're not layer one, you're building on top of layer one.
Yeah. Right? So I mean, we still have a very developer centric ecosystem, right? You could say the exact same thing about like creating an abstraction on top of the different values and the different elements of blockchain development in general, that's something that a lot of Web 2 developers are going to need. They need those abstractions, otherwise it's going to be simply too much information to handle as they come on board, right? So for us, a focus on that is going to be key. And of course, other competitors and other bits and pieces have this, right? Infura has this, and Morales and so on. But really, coming back to how we are going to be, competitive, really, because that's the heart of the question, right? How are we going to stand up to the competitors, right? So we do have an advantage in some elements in this case, right? And we do believe that the experience that the team has, we are in a position to create a platform with our experience alone that will, be competitive. But let's say, we are, as mentioned from some of these other competitors, Infura and Morales and stuff, none of these other platforms have tokens, right? They're simply a Web 2 shop, basically, more or less, with ties into blockchains. And so by us having our own token, we can sort of come up with clever, marketing tactics that allow us to deploy that token and to utilize that token to potentially even short-term incentivize developers to come to our platform and try our services. There's something to be said about developers coming to the platform and, us creating a level of stickiness, if you will, through our free tier that allows them to utilize our platform, get a feel for it, potentially even be incentivized to utilize our platform for a short amount of time in a sustainable way. And if they like our platform, we expect them that they'll come back. Similar to the model and how Netlify works, right? We've seen massive traction in that space in Web 2, and if we could sort of take their similar pricing model and structure about how they onboard developers and create a plan for them to grow and through different measures, then that's sort of slightly how we're tying that back into our pricing model and our developer stickiness model. But there's a lot we could sort of go through in this question, so it is a very long answer, and I do have more that we can talk about, but I do want to also be cautious of time. But I'm happy to chat with you offline a bit about that one as well, if you're interested in continuing the discussion.
I'll do that. I'll just ping you.
Yeah, sounds good.
My last question. Last question, and this is not related to the investors. So common man like me, Sensei, and a whole lot of billionaires over here, they're all investors. But here I'm talking about the other side, who are the developers. So your revenue generating model. So as a developer, does he have to subscribe to your tokens, or are you going to charge him on an API call basis?
It's not going to be per call basis. We have pricing plans, like tiered pricing plans, like developer, team, enterprise, and so on. So they're essentially like plans that you would sign up for in a traditional, like in Infura, it's exactly the same. Morales is exactly the same. Netlify is the same. That sort of concept, right? Where you basically have a per month charge for the services.
Hey, sounds great. Hey, I really appreciate you taking time and patience to respond to my questions.
No worries. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Drive.
Cheers, man.
Appreciate you always adding value. Cat, you were first. What's your question?
Hey, how is everyone doing?
Hey, Cat.
Doing good, thanks.
Nice to talk to you.
I'm actually kind of piggybacking off of Jai's question, and of course, maybe I'll ping you on the side, but would love to hear about what the specifics of those incentives to drive, those people from Web 2 to Web 3 to, your project are.
Yeah. So it's quite a long answer, but I'll give you a bit of a high level. Sorry, otherwise we'll talk forever. But we're drawing inspiration from other successful platforms that we've seen utilize tokens successfully, right? And I think we haven't solidified the exact process of this part of it yet, and some of it I can talk about, and some of it I can't. But elements that we do think that have worked quite well is take, for example, the Brave browser and the BAT token, right? This whole process of you can potentially have users earn a token by interacting with your software, and then you can essentially have external parties advertise or create content on your software as a service and then potentially pay for that, right? So there is a model there that does also align with what we're building. Not through pop-up crappy ads in browsers and such like that, but if layer ones or if certain partners or ecosystems do want to incentivize certain educational content, or if they want to direct a certain amount of developers onto a certain chain or accessing certain things or looking at certain content, that's also something that could be possible through our platform as well. If we were able to if we do utilize our token similarly to the way that Brave utilized the BAT. So that's something I will say now. I can't go too much more into detail about it, unfortunately.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate it. I'll ping you on the side. And then you talked about, that push and the pull of the supply and demand of the investors as well as the developers. Do you have certain projects that you are partnering with? I know you didn't want to get into like any specific like who, but do you have a certain number of projects that you're kind of incubating already?
Not at this stage. So we really are making sure that we do have a lot of processes in place to ensure the longevity of our platform and the sustainability. So we're not going to be like this. We launched and we're just rushing out the door to make sure we land everyone as soon as we can, right? We are making sure that we build like our product, the actual software as a service offering is not going to be out the door live in a 1.0 release until around mid to late June, right? So we are building up initially our capacity. We're ensuring our team doesn't burn out, and we're having a healthy balance between working our ass off and ensuring that we create a great product. And then also we'll get down to sort of the partnerships and engaging in the incentive programs and so on. So it's a very interesting dynamic of that process, but nothing I can really talk about too much now, other than the generic incentive programs that we'll be partnering with at the layer 1 and layer 2 level.
Sure. No problem. I appreciate it. And then my last question is more on the developer side. So you talked about someone, new, just trying to test out the system with a node. Do certain project sizes have different node requirements? Like
Great
they're a
question.
smaller project, they require 1 to 5 nodes versus larger projects because they're so much more complex, more nodes?
For sure, yeah. I mean, some elements, some projects only need access to testnet, right? Like some developers just want to interact, deploy a contract on testnet, mess around. Some want to have access to both testnet and mainnet. Some might also need a load balance set of servers, right, behind the scenes, right? If they have a large amount of throughput and they want a dedicated, TPS or transactions per second or throughput per second, then they might need to basically balance that load through a set of distributed servers behind the scenes. So it really depends on who the consumer is. If it's a single developer just wanting to deploy on testnet, it's very different to a very professional business wanting to create an actual product or a company and act as a sort of dedicated endpoint for that infrastructure. So every sort of level of that and all the in-betweens, we're going to be there to support those different different customers along the way.
And my one small follow-up question to that is, if there's a requirement for, larger amounts of nodes, is that another potential investment stream or revenue stream for you guys, where if there's a larger company requiring more nodes, you would charge them more above the, tiered service?
The highest, we'll have, our highest level of tiering will be basically like enterprise level tiering, where we can essentially, us and our engineering team can almost like act as a consultancy or an advisor for that business as well. And the whole, helping them build and sort of bring their application into fruition. Like that idea, if we do get engaged with businesses at that level, and we do plan to, that will be like high level, we'll have like SLAs in place, and obviously all of that will be very contractual. So about how we sort of structure that work. And so the pricing around all that will be sort of aligned with their, what it is they're actually requiring and what that ties into. So yeah, we can't say the exact pricing structure of how that will break down at the moment, but we'll sort of have a very, almost like consultancy element to the way that we're able to interact with these businesses, because we do bring in, not only just like smart contract expertise, but also financial expertise and how to actually create a Web3 product. That's also something we'll be working with our partners and enterprise customers to ensure they succeed.
Very nice. I appreciate all your time, and I really look forward to participating.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. I really appreciate you coming up. You always have amazing questions. Thank you so much. King Titus, my friend, how are you? You there, King?
Yeah.
Oh, we hear you,
Yeah.
brother. Go for it, my friend. I know you have a couple of questions for these guys. Go for it.
So these are like real servers, right? Like physical. Where are they going to be at? Huh?
Virtual servers. Yeah. So I mean,
okay, how are you going to run? Okay, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but how are you going to run like Binance nodes and stuff on virtual servers?
they're all, in your case, in their example, a Binance node is just an EVM compatible blockchain node. So it's all runs on a VM. Everything runs on a VM. Of course, the VMs run on hardware, but the hardware is fully managed by our cloud providers, right? So we don't have to handle any of that. We don't want to have to do the undifferentiated heavy lifting of creating data centers, which have a very high capital expenditure associated with them. We want to outsource all of that to, the economies of scale that Amazon and Microsoft have, and simply just consume the compute level of the virtual machine to create the nodes that are required for our customers.
Right. Well, so I've tried to build a Binance node on VM, and I've been unsuccessful. I ended up having to use a dedicated root server.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to overcome issues like that? Because, I mean, if you're going to do it on VM, sounds like that's going to end up being quite expensive, way more expensive than a dedicated root server running it would be.
No, so I mean, we are already running all of our nodes already. Like we are launching our app. Nodeify is launching in just over a week. So we already have Near, AVAX, Phantom, and Polygon all running in AWS in load balance clusters in the multiple different regions, and we haven't had any issues like that.
Well, those are the easy ones.
No,
as far as like the blockchain nodes, as far as those are the easier ones to run.
Maybe that's why they're starting with those first.
Near itself, I wouldn't say is easy. It's a non EVM compatible chain. It's a brand new ecosystem. There's very hardly anyone actually offering Near nodes right now. It sort of falls line.
Let me rephrase. Not Near, just AVAX and Phantom. I've never set up a Near node.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, those nodes are relatively straightforward. Anything that's a fork of Geth is going to be pretty straightforward to set up. But setting something up is very different to automating, scaling, and actually having all of the different automation pipelines in place to be able to facilitate them and to be able to deploy them into many geographical regions within minutes. Like that's a whole different process than to SSH into a server and set one up, right? We're not just going to run one node. We have to run hundreds and hundreds of nodes to be able to facilitate what it is we want to achieve as a business.
Right. So how are you guys going to perform in comparison to some of these other companies that are offering hardware nodes and not VM nodes?
So, I mean, we could, you do have the ability in cloud providers to actually have dedicated hardware nodes set up if that is something that we do actually see. So if we actually look at the performance, because we have built in, we have monitoring and metrics in place to understand the operational level outputs of our servers and of our fleet, and also, of course, the interactions with the nodes themselves. So if we do see a large, sort of degradation in performance of our nodes, we can sort of do benchmarking against hardware-based nodes to understand if there is actually a competitive advantage to do that. If our customers would be willing to, pay the extra to run hardware-based nodes. Of course, it's far more expensive than running a VM. That's something that we can consider, but at this point in time, we don't think that that's going to be it's not a very scalable solution to just sort of set up a whole bunch of hardware if we have the ability to scale virtual machines rapidly based on metrics from like a load balancer, for example. So we'll have a look as we go. Going back to your example on a Binance node, it's not something that we've even looked in yet. It's not actually where we see demand right now at all. The complete opposite, actually. So it specifically probably will not be one of the initial networks that we look at.
Okay. And then so I have another question. So your coin, what utility was the coin? I'm sorry, I kind of came into the.
No worries, man.
I apologize.
No worries, that's fine. So we have a token, NDFI is the token, and the token facilitates the creation of the compute capacity that runs our software as a service offering, right? So as a node operator, like if you want to create a node, like a Near node, for example, or whatever, Polygon node, the investor side will forfeit the 10 tokens required to create those nodes initially, and then the compute capacity goes into our backend that we can then facilitate over the different chains that we need to serve our business and service our customers.
Okay, so I don't understand so I get what you're saying, but I don't understand what the point of the coin is. Like you could have just done like a VC,
sure,
like funding, and then you'd have the same.
The coin is multifaceted. It can be used from the perspective of the developer side as well to actually pay for the services as such. So from the consumer side of the business, the software as a service offering, you can actually consume those services. Like if you were paying your AWS bill, you pay that in USD. You can actually pay the bill or pay for these services in our native token also. So our token is the gateway for all node operations from an investor and developer perspective. Of course, we also offer fiat as a payment on the consumer side, but the token itself also allows us to offer alternative payment method for the consumers of the business. And as I was just sort of speaking about before as well, the token allows us to employ different marketing tactics to entice developers to our platform as well. So it can be used in many different ways, and sort of being creative as possible sort of allows us to inject it into different areas.
So my next question is, so how are you guys going to be able to connect all those finances? If you're going to be able to take fiat, if you're going to be taking crypto, if you're going to have servers and, you know, all over the world, how are you guys going to get around regulations and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, actually Stripe, just the other day, Stripe released, they were sort of partnering up for, you know, crypto payments as well. So Stripe are doing a whole bunch of work. I mean, obviously they sort of see what's happening at the moment and they're taking advantage of that. So there is actually a bunch of work going into not only Stripe, but into some of their competitors as well to streamline payments in crypto across different projects and stuff like that. So we'll be, you know, there are many other projects that allow you to pay today in fiat or crypto. And so it's not like we'll be the first ones to do that. We're not innovating in that element, but we are, you know, from the perspective of other tactics that we can employ with our token. But, you know, the idea is that the revenue from the software as a service offering, it doesn't all have to go directly, you know, it's essentially pooled, right? We can then take that from that pool and use that to, you know, proportionally pay the bills, or, you know, the nodes themselves, of course, have a maintenance fee associated with them to facilitate the bill side of the, you know, running the virtual machines in the cloud, for example. But, you know, realistically, what it comes back to is ensuring that we offset emissions, right? That's really what this is all about, inputs and outputs. Like every project in crypto is about inputs and outputs, right? So as long as we are able to have a sustainable stream of revenue coming in to offset those emissions from our software as a service offering, that's the only thing we are really focused on, and ensuring we do that is key. So,
okay. I mean, I still think that maybe there might be a little something to, you know, multinational, you know, because you guys are going to try to have this all over the world. You want to be able to pop up servers everywhere. So you're going to have to have, you know, contracts with some of these big data centers.
No, I mean, that's all handled in AWS, right? Like that's the beauty of the cloud. It abstracts the complexity. There's no need for data centers. There's no need for.
You're saying that you're only using AWS. You're only using Amazon for the entire company.
Well, like most large national companies, like Amazon.com, for example, is obviously just running on Amazon, or like Uber, like many large Web 2 companies only run on one cloud provider. The idea of multi-cloud is a joke in enterprise these days. I don't want to sound like too sort of elitist talking about Web 2 stuff here, but multi-cloud in its concept is not really a thing. And if we tie this back into Web 3, over 25% of Ethereum runs on AWS, over 40% of AVAX and 40% of Phantom run on AWS. If AWS has issues at a sort of a global level, you know, blockchain as we know it is going to take a bit of a hit and have to spend quite a bit of time.
That happened earlier this year, didn't we? I believe.
Yeah, we did. We had validators that were overstaked on you don't even know if they were on AWS, but they were overstaked and they couldn't catch up to the block height, and that caused the second most overstaked validator to start lagging, and then they couldn't handle the block creation between the other ones, and that caused a massive slowdown. So, the reality is, like, AWS is I'm not going to use the word decentralized, but each of the regions and each of the availability zones within those regions is completely on its own isolated power grid. It's fault tolerant through even from natural disasters. They're built, you know, in different geographical elements in those regions. It's an incredibly fault tolerant system, and you know, most of the world trusts it to run their critical business. So why wouldn't we? You know.
King, did you have anything else before I move on to the last question, Jeremy?
No. That's it for me. Thank you, guys.
Appreciate
Thanks for the questions.
Jeremy, the final question. I hope it's a solid one. What you got, man? No pressure.
Jeez, no kidding. All these technical questions have been mind-blowing. Good night. I'm going to try to keep it a little bit simpler from the investor side. You had mentioned, you made a statement, and I hope I recap this correctly, but something about we don't necessarily want everyone coming in and creating all of this node or all of that node. Mm-hmm. And so right now I'm kind of an AVAX, Avalanche, Maxi. And so I'm wondering, like, do all investors come in through Phantom and then you can create nodes on these other chains, or do I wait if I want to be involved until you start creating Avalanche nodes and then I can come in with AVAX and stuff like that?
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for the question. Yeah, so all of our operations happen on Phantom, right? Like that is where our smart contract is deployed. Our DApp interfaces with a smart contract that's on Phantom. And through that interface, you will be able to deploy nodes across any of our supported networks, right? So we're starting off with the ones we talked about, so Phantom, AVAX, Polygon, and Near. And so you'll be able to just basically click on the node you want from the dropdown, press create, and that's as simple as that. Then our backend automation handles the creation and facilitation of those capacity units, and that's it. As simple as that.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. Thank you.
Appreciate you, Jeremy. Thank you for waiting. I know it was a little bit of time there. Guys, before we close out, is there anything maybe that we have not gone over? I know this is a very detailed AMA, and we had some great questions from the community, but is there anything that was left out that you feel is important that we need to know?
That's a great question. So, I mean, I apologize as well. I do ramble a lot.
No, you're good, Quix. You did a great job, man. You did a great job.
No, but I think nothing really comes to mind. Dex, I see you're unmuted. Do you have something that we may?
No. I was saying I have nothing. Like, I think this was like probably one of the most in-depth AMAs we've done so far. Also, thanks to the community for the great questions.
Yeah, we really
have an opportunity to kind of answer
exactly
that far in depth. That's just
exactly
nice to
like
see.
we also do an AMA in our Discord every week, and like the main thing we want is like keep us honest, like keep the tech questions coming, like ask us why we're not doing something or why we are choosing to do something. Like the last thing we want is to drop that level of like trust with anyone. So we just hold us accountable. Yeah.
Beautiful, Mr. Cricket. Did you have anything you wanted to say in closing, my friend?
Just that it's also going to be very educational focused on what we're providing, and it's not only going to be something for the very in-depth developer that already knows what it is that they're doing and has a lot of experience and backgrounds in the space. I kind of feel that there's a huge lack of education right now for the common investor that doesn't really understand how these things are working. So after launch, I'm going to be trying to be more open and break things down from what Quix is saying more into layman's terms and kind of get it to be more digestible for the average person, so they know what it is that we're actually offering as well. And if they actually want to go down the roads of being a developer or pursuing these things themselves, they can actually use their own nodes that they've created to kind of start exploring and pursuing these avenues.
No, education is the most important thing, guys. That's why Grant and I created Cryptonairz. We really wanted to educate people on crypto and every facet of it. And if you guys want to create some videos with our team or whatever you guys want to do, we'd be happy to work with you guys to create some educational videos for your community as well. And I just wanted to thank you guys for taking this hour and 20 minutes to go over just such a detailed overview of what Nodeify is. And I really wish you guys the best. And we look forward to having a follow-up AMA here, maybe in a month or two, or whatever it is, to really kind of figure out where you guys have gone since you've launched. And I just want to wish you guys all the best. And I know I'll be participating in the project, and I'm sure there's going to be a ton of people that listen to this AMA that are going to want to participate too. So thank you so much. And I just want to remind everybody at home that nothing here said is financial advice. We're just bringing you information on a fantastic new project with a fantastic team. I look forward to seeing where you guys take this thing. So thank you so much for your time. And I bid you guys adieu. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate it.
All right, guys. Cheers, guys.